You don't put a left-handed pitcher up against Jordan Alvarez with 2 on. By the way, everybody take note, jot that down.
Just put that in your pipe.
The World Series wrapped up the other day, and if you have not been paying attention or forgot or something, I don't know. The Houston Astros won. They beat the Philadelphia Phillies 4-2. There you have it. Thanks for joining. We'll catch you next week. Thank you. No. But despite that all being true, we're not going to wrap up. We're going to wrap up this series by actually talking about things that we saw, some takeaways, things like that. It was really interesting. So Jewel and I recorded the final episode this year of the Seattle Baseball Together podcast last night, and we were talking about how the Phillies played the Astros. And it was really interesting, some of the things that I guess some of the conclusions that we came to, that we still felt like the Mariners were the most competitive team against the Astros the entire postseason. Because you look at what happened with Philly, yes, they won 2 games. The Mariners were not able to win any. But in those 2 games that the Phillies won, one of them, the Astros pitcher was tipping his pitches.
Mm-hmm.
Lance McCullers got lit up, right?
Yeah.
And then in the other one, you had a traditional Justin Verlander World Series start.
Yep.
Other than that, they're completely shut down to the point that they got no hit in the World Series.
Facts.
That's how dominant the Houston Astros were in the World Series. It was really interesting to kind of talk through it all and come to that conclusion that it wasn't quite as competitive as it looked.
You're right. Yeah. Now, once you break it down like that, and hindsight being 2020, that's true, because the devil is in the details, and that's where they got picked apart. Mm-hmm. And
real world time. They only led game 1 for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Something like that is what Nick Castellanos said. He's like, takes 15 minutes to hold a lead. That's all you got to do. But sorry, go ahead. I cut you off.
No, it's okay. I was saying that on Instagram, one of our followers on Instagram went back after the World Series ended to comment on my game 1 game 1 takeaway, and he said, "Well, that didn't age well." I thought it was really good. I haven't commented back yet, but I mean to. So if you're listening, I got you. You're right, and it's awesome.
It is funny though that after game 1, I think mostly for game 1 for all of us, it was the shock, right? That the Phillies were able to come out and just punish Verlander the way they did. It's like, well, maybe they can do something here, because they do have a ton of firepower in that lineup. They should be getting home runs off of everybody. But the other thing we saw is that home runs aren't going to win you the World Series.
Listen, Brad, that's exactly right. That's all I had to say. You're right.
Well, there we go.
The end.
So this was one of my takeaways from Game 6. So I did takeaways for Game 6, and one of the things I said was the 2017 Astros brought you launch angle and won the World Series that way. Aside from everything else, right? Their philosophy was launch angle, and then everybody went with it after that. But now 2022, the Astros are like, okay, we are good at hitting dingers. That will get us to the World Series. But the thing that's going to take us over the top and help us win the World Series is pitching. So they relied so heavily on their pitching this entire postseason run. During the World Series, the Astros only averaged 3 2/3 runs per game.
Holy cow.
And they still won it.
Postseason?
Well, in the World Series.
Okay. I was like, ugh.
But I don't think it's much above that.
No, I think you're right.
An 8-7 game against the Mariners in Game 1 of the division series is really going to up that number. But other than that, nothing else will.
I wonder what the run differential is. That's interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that a team who didn't score a whole lot of runs, they did rely a lot on the home run, but in the World Series, it was stringing together doubles.
That's what was
it, Game 2? They started with 3 doubles in a row.
Yeah,
4 doubles in a row.
And Jeremy Pena, I feel like, was at the heart of all of that, especially during the postseason run while Altuve wasn't even functional.
Oh, yeah. Ice cold Altuve was a problem, but Jeremy Pena made up for all of it with working long at bats, getting Jordan Alvarez up, who, by the way, speaking of ice cold,
right, I was just
almost forgot to show up to the World Series.
Almost. And then finally he just decided that he would, I don't know, put his cleats on or something.
In Game 6,
it was pretty cool.
By the way,
yeah,
Philly Rob decided to go lefty in a big moment. He must have forgotten to watch Game 1 of the division series. Where you don't put a left-handed pitcher up against Jordan Alvarez with 2 on. By the way, everybody take note, jot that down.
Just put that in your pipe. Yeah,
right.
I agree. I don't know, man. It's astonishing. Those statistics are really interesting to me because it didn't feel dominant, right? It felt competitive for a lot longer than it was.
It did, because it felt for a lot of it, even when the Phillies were down 5 in what was it? When they were getting no hit.
Yeah.
You felt like eventually it's like, okay, well, they can't get no hit. It's the World Series, right? Like something's got to break through, and then another one will break through, and they'll string them together, and they'll come back.
Yeah.
And they even drew walks late in the game where it's like, okay,
They did.
Like,
here we go.
Like, yeah, it's like, here we go. Okay, here's the opportunity. Put one in the gap. You've got 2 guys coming around to score, and you're gonna have a game again. But it just never happened. Pitching and defense was the calling card for the Astros this postseason, and it worked.
It worked.
Yeah,
it really did.
Yeah, they shut down the Phillies offense. They shut down big time the Yankees offense too.
Bro, it's the Yankees shut down the Yankees offense. Like, you can't even, I mean, you have to give the Astros some credit, but you can't give them all the credit. That was some major internal struggling going on.
I think there was, but I wonder if some of the internal struggle came from frustration from the Astros pitching.
Sure.
Because they were so just good.
Unreal good.
Yeah, starting pitching, bullpen, all of it front to back. And I'm curious if we're going to see a shift again, because professional sports are copycat leagues. Like, somebody wins, right? Like the Astros won with launch angle in 2017, and everybody goes, "Let's go launch angle," and then you see it all across the league. But now it's going back to the old philosophy of pitching, and I'm curious if small ball goes along with that.
With the shift being banned,
being banned. Exactly.
That's what it is. And you got your managers who are going to understand that, like Buck Showalter, like Dusty Baker, that are really going to they're going to shine. These old school managers are really going to have a heyday this year.
I think they will, and it'll be interesting to see how things like the bunt come into play, because it's almost been completely eliminated from the game.
Right? Unless your name's Kyle Schwarber and you bunt yourself out of an at-bat. Oh, that was heartbreaking. I didn't understand that call.
What was he even doing?
I don't know if he was told to do it, or
I don't think
decision.
I don't think he was told to do it, because I don't know why any manager would ever tell a guy to bunt with 2 strikes.
And
this is the thing. This is the thing I said. I was like, I understand it. Okay, Bregman's shifted. He's in the shortstop position. Nobody's expecting ever a bunt with 2 strikes. But you know what happens sometimes when you try to do something that nobody's expecting to happen in a moment where they're not expecting it to happen? You throw a pick on the 1-yard line of the Super Bowl. That's what happens.
That's what happens. That's right.
You overthink it and you beat yourself.
You beat yourself. That's a great way to put it. Anyway,
that was weird.
It was weird and infuriating, and also, like, that's baseball, Susan, right? Like,
that's a baseball, Susan.
You're like, I don't know. What are you gonna do?
Absolutely,
big dummy.
Yeah. So, Brig, we talked going into the World Series about how some of the playoffs had been boring, right? Like, the ALCS was pretty boring the way that the Astros dominated the Yankees. And how did you feel about the World Series overall, though? Like, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I thought it was fun to watch, and it's like you said, like, it didn't feel like domination in the moment. You had to go back and talk about it after to really figure out that that's what it was.
Yeah.
But no, I thought it was fun to watch. It was really enjoyable. And like I said, even when the Phillies were getting no hit, they were putting the ball in play and getting on base via walks. And you felt like it was just a matter of time for him to get back into it. And the anticipation, I felt more like I was watching a soccer game than anything, with the anticipation building up. It's the same energy. Like, okay, here goes. No.
Yeah. Regroup.
Still 0-0 in the 76th minute,
Yeah.
That's kind of how it felt with the Phillies.
It's a good analogy. That is how it felt. No, I thought it was great. I think that for me, it's always the storylines, right? Like, Nick Castellanos saving that game with that heroic diving catch out in left field. That was amazing. the coming back from a 5-0 deficit for Philly was amazing. Verlander figuring it out in game 4 or whatever it was fantastic. I just thought, for me, it's the storylines. And Jeremy Pena was my favorite part of the entire situation.
I know, and I was really upset that he was my favorite part because I can't cheer for a division rival, nor can I cheer for anybody on a division rival. But I was waiting for him to do something every single time he came up to bat, and he pretty much did.
Every time. His defense was impeccable the whole postseason, but especially in the World Series. And he committed a ton of errors early in the season. Mm-hmm. We talked about that. Was it 19 errors or some craziness?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So I was really talk about comeback storylines and rookie, and then he won the MVP. It was fabulous. So much fun.
Yeah. It was a good time. It was a lot of fun. I don't know. I'm already looking forward to next year, mostly because of my optimism for the Mariners. But it does curb it a little bit, though, like the Astros coming in as World Series champions.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was not part of my prediction, was not the Astros winning the World Series this year. I thought that maybe they were going to start to tail off a little bit because they were losing guys and stuff like that. But it's like, well, shoot, now they've got Jeremy Pena. Kyle Tucker is going to be a legitimate MVP candidate next year, probably.
Yeah,
Jordan Alvarez will continue to be an MVP candidate next year, and the pitching is unbeatable. So what do?
You hire Trey Turner
as your second baseman.
You have to. You hire Trey Turner and you start 0 and you build it all the way up.
Yep.
And you whip everybody. You got to beat the crap out of everybody in your division. But then there's that new weirdo schedule this year with the blended schedule. So
yeah, the balanced schedule. Yeah,
you have to beat the teams you have to beat to come out on top this year, this 2023.
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't like to compare year over year exactly, just because rosters change. But I will be curious the plus or minus on the Astros. What, 101 wins this year?
Yeah,
and they even started slow, and they won 101 games
for sure. Yeah,
so I'm curious the plus or minus on that going into next year, like how they'll end next year with the balanced schedule, because they don't get to beat up on the A's every week.
Exactly.
They don't get to beat up on the Rangers or the Angels. So. Or the Mariners, for that matter, because that's what they do.
I wasn't going to say it. But that's
true. One of the reasons I hate the Astros, because they always beat up on the Mariners.
That's right. So it'll be interesting because they're going to see the Yankees more, than they would have during the regular season. They're going to see, and then other teams that they never see, they're going to see them. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
They'll whoop up on Pittsburgh, so we'll see.
Yep, that's right.
Balance out.